community grant acquittal forms, as that they do have the same flow of questions in most of those. My name's Carolyn Boss. I am the Grant Support Officer in the Community Grants team, and I've got Rosie Sheehan with me this evening, who is helping me out tonight as well, and will give you some additional feedback, information regarding the community grants which are open at the moment. So we'll just head to the next slide.
Excellent. Thanks, Carolyn. We'll start with our beautiful acknowledgement to country. The City of Casey proudly acknowledges the traditional owners, Casey's Aboriginal communities and their rich cultures, and pays respect to their elders past, present and future. We acknowledge Aboriginal people as Australia's first peoples and as the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which we work and live. And we're also going to go through our beautiful diversity and inclusion statement, which I think is absolutely paramount to why we have our grants program. The City of Casey is home to a remarkable diversity of cultures, languages, faiths, identities, landscapes and stories. From our first Australians to our most recent arrivals and every wave in between, the City of Casey welcomes and represents all community members and their respective ambitions to live healthy, rewarding and happy lives. These intersecting and overlapping community stories form Casey's collective identity and contribute to its evolving, rich history. We recognise this diversity as our strength and we aim to share, nurture and celebrate it.
Thanks,
So,
Rosie.
So as Carolyn said, we're part of our grants team here at Casey. We're small, but there are 4 of us. We have our team leader, Kristen Sweeney, myself and Jess Field. We co-share the Grants Development Officer role and Carolyn's our Grants Admin. We're always available on that email address that you can see just there. If you send us an email, one of the 4 of us will get back to you if you have any queries on anything. So that's our team. And I'll just flick to the next one too. As we were saying, our community grants is actually now open at the moment. So for groups watching and those here tonight, if you're thinking of putting in a grant, we still have a few weeks. They close on the 26th of April at 5 p.m. So just be aware of that, that they do shut at that time and that's the close off. So the grants program, you can apply for a minimum of $1,000 up to $5,000 for programs and activities and those sorts of things. For community groups, they're obviously open to community groups and organisations that service or are in the Casey community for not-for-profits. So as I say, we just want people who are applying to be assisting our community groups and doing activities and things like that for the community. We ask that groups be incorporated or auspiced, i.e. managed by under the insurance of another group. And we do require that groups have a minimum of 10 million public liability assurance if they are going to apply. So if you have a project in mind, our team are more than happy to chat further if you need to go through anything or have a few ideas. I'll now hand back to Carolyn though for what we're here for tonight, which is our acquittal process.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Rosie. So, acquittals. This is not the most exciting part of a grant, but it is a very necessary part of a grant. If you'd like to say the acquittal is the final part of a grant that is telling the story, it's closing the loop, it's the final part of the final piece of the puzzle, as to say, for a grant. So just in some dot points I've put in here, what is an acquittal? It's a summary of your program or event. So this just encompasses everything that your grant was for. So it tells the story of your successes and your challenges. It gives you a place to reflect of what your grant program or event was. What were the outcomes for Casey residents? That's a big thing that we want to hear. What demographics benefited from your event? So we have so many community groups out there that are reaching so many different demographics in the city of Casey, and being such a huge local government area of around 360 to 70,000 people, one of the biggest in Australia, we as a council can't reach every single person, hence why we have a massive grants program to encompass all of the wonderful works that community groups do. So we asked to know what demographics are benefiting from your program or event, what were the highlights, the costs involved in the program and event, and not just the grant income and expenditure, but what other income may you have got in terms of tickets, donations, those sorts of things, volunteer hours, donations, if you were selling things, if you were selling books or those sorts of things, and the expenses, so the total expenses. So if it was an event, we want to know what the total expense of that event was, and that Casey's contribution was maybe $5,000, but it was a $20,000 event, and where the other income came from and where all the expenses went to. For acquittals, we do need proof of expenses. That's including tax invoices and receipts. What the in-kind contributions were, which are the volunteer hours and donations, and obviously the declaration to say that that information on the acquittal is correct. Not only do we want to get this information for a community impact statement, report, those sorts of things that we want to share publicly, but it is also an expectation from the Australian Tax Office that we do have that proof of expense to say that the council ratepayers' money has gone to what it has been approved to go to in the grant application. So if we say an organisation has been given $5,000 for venue hire in catering, and then they end up coming back saying, well, here's the receipt for my expenses at the bar at Crown Casino, that's obviously not going to be the best use of council's money, and that's not going to pass in an audit if we use that as an example, because what was approved for that grant was venue hire and catering for a community group in the city of Casey at the venue which you stated on your application, and for the residents of the city of Casey. So we need to have that trail for our auditing purposes as well. So what probably the next thing that will happen is you will have received an email that looks a bit like this. So this is the email that you would get to say that you've received the acquittal form. It'll come from service@smartygrants.com.au, and it'll be sent to the person who is the contact on your application. So it'll give you a link here that'll take you to Smarty Grants, which is the application that you've used to apply for your grant on. So if you then put in your username and password, and okay, so you'll see here, it'll come up with a list of things, forms that are in your profile. So, and if it's not there, there's this little button up the top, and this is a real key as well. If you're doing any sort of applications, always go to My Submissions at the top, because it'll come up with any application forms that are open. So if you start an application for a community grant for this year, and you've saved it along the way, always save your applications as you go along. So then you don't have to restart it every time you go in. And if you hit that My Submissions button up the top, it'll come up with a list of open forms that you have that are available for you. So for this one, I'm looking at the test acquittal form for community grants. Yours won't say test, it'll just have the acquittal form for community grants. And if we click on that, it's going to come up with the acquittal form. So what I might just do is I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint presentation, because what I've done is I've popped all the information in this form into the PowerPoint presentation, and I've just added some additional footnotes in there, just so we can run along each of those questions and just with some additional notes in there. So give me 2 seconds. I'm just going to go back to the PowerPoint presentation. So this is just starting from the start. Now, with the program and event details, this part of the form is pre-filled based on your application form. So this you can't actually edit. So you can see that the program or the event title was Casey Connects. So that's the name that I gave my test event. And it was running a program to include City of Casey residents to increase their physical activity and an opportunity to meet more people within their community. So that was just my really short, sweet event description. So as it says here, this is being copied from the original application form and cannot be changed. It may also be useful to remind you of what you've written in your application form. So this will help you to understand that, to say, oh, which grant, if you have been successful in a number of grants from different organisations and you're thinking, oh, what did I get this money for? What did I get that money for? You can always go back to your application in that My Submissions list as well to see your full application, but then it's also written in here to make sure that you are acquitting for the right event or program. So variations. With variations to your a program or event, that does need to come through the community grants development officers to be approved prior to changes being made. So there is a variation request form that does need to be completed. It does include a new budget. And as explained before, that just is because all of these community grants are approved at a very senior level of the organisation. Therefore, it needs to be approved as eligible expenses for a program or event that is benefiting City of Casey residents for eligible expenses. So to cover yourself, if there's any changes to your original application, you just need to get in contact with us and let us know. If they're minor things like you're changing the dates, but it's still the same program or event type, then you can always just give us a call and say, oh, we're just moving from term 4 due to lockdown to term 1 due to lockdown. Then that's something that we may not need to get a whole variation request because all the expenses are still going to be the same. So, so here we say, it does say, did you complete a variation request to make major ones? Yes or no? Did it need changing due to COVID? Yes, if you didn't, like we asked you, Zabi, yes, there were changes, but you didn't complete a variation request, but it did get changed due to COVID. And what were changes? We had to change the timelines due to COVID. So that's what those questions are for. So then we get to the evaluation part of the form. So where was the event? When did the program take place? Again, the location, if you are moving the location, as long as it's still in Casey, that's okay. If you're looking at outside of Casey, we need to know about that and need to understand that, is it still going to be benefiting Casey residents? If you're moving it to the other side of the city, it's unlikely Casey residents are going to attend, whereas if it's on the border of City of Dandenong, then there's still the opportunity for the City of Casey people would be attending that sort of event. But again, please let us know about that. And estimate how many people participated. So this is where we want to know how far your reach is. And look, it doesn't matter if it means if your event was big and got 1,500 people there, if that was your goal, or if you were planning on trying to engage 10 people in a weekly program to get them out of their house, get them socializing, get them exercising, that's just as important. And so it doesn't mean that your grant program isn't successful because you've had 10 people, because you may have changed those 10 people's lives. So that's really important information for us. So, but if there are less than you expected, if you know a reason why that may have been, it could have been like if it was a big event, weather, if it was a smaller weekly event and you were getting less participants, were people a bit worried about COVID? Were they unable to attend due to the venue or multiple reasons? But again, you were the professionals in that space creating that program and would have that first-hand experience. So the evaluation, what did the program event achieve? What were the outcomes? So this is where you what did people get out of it? They came to your event, they came to your program. What did people get out of attending your program or event? How did it affect the community that you were working with? So our events and programs range from things like Christmas carols for 2,000 people to um, a weekly catch up for 5 to 10 people from an Italian senior citizens club running a lunch every Thursday. So what did people get out of that? People from a $2,000 carols, 2,000 person carols event obviously got a very social, family orientated event around festive season time. It was a chance to bring people together, to celebrate. And for a small 5 to 10 people group of senior citizens, they came out of there, they were coming out of their houses, they were communicating with their own community, and feeling supported and surrounded by people that they have grown connections with. So that's what were the benefits. Obviously, there's going to be things like mental health benefits, there's going to be health benefits, there's going to be social benefits. That's the sort of stuff that we're looking at there. So what population groups were affected by this? In your application, you would have chosen which demographics that you were aiming to attract to this program or event. And so this is where you say, okay, so who actually attended it? So you're just putting down the sorts of people with the age groups, gender, ethnicity, those sorts of things. So it's not a drop-down box, but you'll just be able to type some of the demographics that you've had attend your group program or event. So this is the feel-good stuff. What were the highlights of the program? So this is where we like to try and get some, if you've got some quotes from some of the participants, if there's some really feel-good stories like maybe Mavis from so-and-so retirement village came to our group very shy and reserved. Now she's the secretary of our committee. And it was great to see her transformation in being socially isolated to being so involved with the community group. Or we had disadvantaged youth in our community that are now engaging in weekly sporting activities. So these are the highlights of your program or event. Or we had people who were that were suffering during COVID, we were able to provide food relief for this many families, or Christmas presents for this many families who otherwise may not have been able to afford Christmas presents for their children. So they're the sorts of highlights of the program and event that we want to hear, and that we do use some of these stories in some of our communications to the public to say this is the great stuff that the ratepayers are actually putting back into the community. So the money does go back into the community and does assist in making a difference in a lot of people's lives. And this is exactly why we want to get this sort of information from people. There is the opportunity if you want to share photos or anything like that. Obviously, we will not use photos unless we do have uh, consent forms of the people that are in the photos. So it does say, are you happy to be contacted by council to use your images and highlights of your program and event for communication purposes? So we will never use a photo if we do not have consent from the people actually in the photo, not just from the organisation. Obviously, if they are photos that are non-identifiable, like people are non-identifiable, we will contact you as an organisation. We may ask if we can use them, and we are definitely not using photos of children, definitely without permission from parents as well. So that is part of our work safe, child safe strategy, and we are definitely not going down that as well. So okay, so this is a bit more of the evaluations. What did you learn along the way, and what might you do differently? Look, a lot of our community grants, they're new to a lot of groups. They're a new program. They may be a new event, and we expect that community groups are learning all the time about what is working and what is not working, what is required in the community, what isn't required in the community, and we understand that there's give and take in different areas as well. And look, you may have put in that you were going to spend this much on venue hire, and you ended up having to spend a bit more or a bit less, and vice versa with a few other things. So we understand that at the start of a community grant, you may not have nailed the budget properly, but this is a learning, and you can find out what you've done differently from the 2021-2022 budget, or from the 2021-2022 application, for what you're going to apply for the next financial year. So it could be different things. You might look at, what did you learn along the way? Oh, well, we know that doing a mail drop didn't really help us at all. Facebook was really good, so let's maybe try that again. Instagram might be an option that we might do next time. So like they're those sorts of things. What did you learn along the way? And what challenges did you have? If you did have any, you may have nailed it and there was no challenges. Obviously, majority of people are going to put COVID was a challenge, and we all feel that. And obviously, lockdowns were a challenge. The unknowns were a challenge. You plan for something and then it gets pushed back. You plan again, it gets pushed. So yes, so those are the sorts of things we want to know. But if there's any other specific things like, oh, it was really hard to organise hire of a footy ground in Casey, that's something that when I actually process an acquittal, I will look at and I will speak to our sports guys in the facilities team to say, oh, this group had a bit of a hard time being able to hire out a venue. What can we do differently? So this actually helps us help you in the future. So there's a couple of different reasons why we do ask these questions, and it's not just to tick the box, yep, you're done. Like I actually do act on some of these questions if I can see there's a way that I can use this information to further improve the way that we can help you as City of Casey, and what we can do better ourselves. So it's what we learnt along the way through your community grants, and as City of Casey, what we can do better to help support the community groups out there to have their community grants run more smoothly and seamlessly each year. So the budget, this is the fun part. So as I said earlier, the budget is a really important part, as much as it is like probably the most tedious part for any person. It is really important for us. As I said, we do get audited occasionally on our grants programs, and we do need to show that the money is going towards what your application was in there initially. So for this one, I've said that the grant, you'll see in the first column, it's got the income. So the first column is the description of the income. So you can see that I've put in there grant, tickets, organisation input. So your organisation may put in a contribution themselves. So if you're an organisation that gets membership fees for sporting, like as a sports membership from participants and things like that, you may have like funded $1,000 of this program yourself. So you can see that there's $8,400 of $7,400 of funding there. And then you can see on the other side, there's catering that was $4,500. There was venue hire, $2,000. Audiovisual that was $1,500, and marketing that was $400. So just that's what I've worked it out to be. So if I go down to the next page, you should see that those two columns match. So you can see 1,800, 8,400, 8,400, and the income is 0, and that's needs to match each side. So, and the next thing is the uploading of the receipts. So it's sometimes when you do things like catering and things like that, there may be a lot of receipts for Safeway and Coles and things like that, where you if you're running a weekly program, you literally may have hundreds of receipts. In that case, we can be a bit flexible around taking photos of every single receipt, if that's the case. But generally, we do require receipts for the amount of the grant. So if you had, say, the $4,500 in catering, and say if $3,000 of that was from one restaurant, or a butcher's was a big part of that because it was a sausage sizzle or something like that, and you had $2,000 of a receipt from one place, and then you had $2,500 of little receipts, but then you had the venue hire receipts. So you had that, and then if you had the audio visual receipt, so you had 2,000 of catering, 2,000 of venue hire, 1,500 of audio visual, there's your $5,000. So you don't need to use all of those little receipts. In the case where you do only have all of those little receipts, give us a call, and we can sometimes just get you to take a photo of them spread out. You will still need to total them all up yourself, but we may be able to spread them out and take a photo of them all as a whole, and just advise you that you will need to hold on to them and keep them available should we be audited, that we need to have access to them. So there are some ways that we can work with some groups, so then it is not an arduous task of taking photos of 100 supermarket receipts. And I can tell you some people have done that, and I go through every single receipt and do read them all. So, and just make sure that the receipts and the tax invoices that you do attach are from the eligible items in your grant. If you are successful in a grant and there are conditions to your grant, occasionally there are conditions to your grant that will say you have received a grant amount of, it may not be the full amount of your grant application. So you may have asked for $5,000, but we don't fund awards and trophies and things like that. So we will say in your letter not to be used for awards and trophies. So if you attach receipts for that, that won't be eligible for the acquittal. So that can't be counted in that $4,000 for the acquittal. So just make sure that you read the conditions of your grants letter, and it'll be outlined on your grants letter when you receive it of what's not eligible. The in-kind contribution. So these are your volunteer hours and the donated goods or services. So with volunteer hours, we generally base that on around $20 an hour, unless it's a specialised field. So if it's somebody who is like maybe an electrician, and we know that electricians charge us $80 an hour. If you had an electrician come out for 4 hours, you could put $320 in there. So if they are a specialist volunteer, but you're not paying them, then you can put that specialised rate in. But generally, we just say if there was 50 hours of volunteer work, that would be $1,000 worth of volunteer hours. Donated goods or services, so that could be anything. That could be some food bank donating food, people donating things for hampers. So anything that people have donated for your program or event. So, and again, this is really important because this shows what the community have also put into your program and event. We can say that you've received this funding from the City of Casey, but it's unbelievable. Like it's been in the past $6 of volunteer hours to $1 of grant money for programs and events, which is just unbelievable. So what we've been able to provide to run a program or event, $6 worth of volunteer hours has gone into providing those programs and events. So those sort of statistics just really go to show that, like the community organisations out there running these programs and events really do a fantastic job and would not be able to be as successful as they are without the input of these volunteers and the donations and contributions that go into it. So that's something that we really do value, and especially value the data of, because we want to really recognise that as part of the City of Casey as well. Again, those first two boxes, you can see they're greyed out, so that automatically pre-populates. And you can put where your in-kind hours more or less than you anticipated. So we do have that question in the application form for your community grant to say how many hours do you anticipate being volunteered for, and you can just put in whether there was more or less than you anticipated, and if you know why, then if you can give some detail around that as well. So, and again, that gives us an opportunity. We have we have a person that is dedicated to working in volunteering. So that's, again, if it was we couldn't find enough volunteers, well, that's when I go to my volunteer person to say, hey, can you hook us up and see whether we can find some matches for you? And so again, it's from that learning, and it's, yeah, that able to put you in the right direction, point you to the right person to be able to help with it next time. And it's all about how we can help you better your programs and events in the future. So as I said, the acquittal of grants funds, keep your receipts. Biggest thing that I can say. And as I said, even if it's a Coles receipt for $3, just, I don't know what you can buy from Taco Bell and why that receipt is in there as an example, because I don't know what you can get for $2.78 at Taco Bell. But keep your receipts. Obviously, it's an online acquittal form. The ineligible items, you can still put it in there as an expense, but you just can't use a receipt for that to be used as part of your acquittal form. Contact us for changes to your program prior to them happening, because if I get an acquittal that comes through that is totally different to what your application is for, your expenses are totally different to what your application is for, we may come back to you and say, look, unfortunately, this was not what was approved. In some cases, we can be really flexible, but if it's ineligible, we may say, look, unfortunately, this is not eligible. You can still use the funding for the eligible items and give you time to do that. But if in some cases, we may not, I mean, if you're not in a financial situation to be able to do that, then we need to come up with a different solution for that. So that's why it's always like crucial for you to communicate with us. And as I said, we are very, very flexible. We don't want to take money back off the community. We want to keep the money in the community, and we will work as hard as we can with organisations if they do want to change their programs to make sure it is an eligible program, and to make sure that money stays in the community, because we don't want to take it off you, because we know the importance of what community groups are in the community and the City of Casey residents. So yeah, I just wanted to open up for any questions that anyone had.